late there.
You're good. It's all good. All right. So since we have a quorum, I'm going to call to order the City of Indio Sustainability Commission meeting. And with that, we will do roll call. So I'm here. Sarah, you do this. Pardon me. Go ahead.
Anytime you feel free.
No, you go ahead. You do this because you can probably call my name out and I can call myself. It's probably a little less weird that way.
You got it. Chair Benson?
Here.
Vice Chair Liu?
I am here.
Commissioner Romero?
Here.
Commissioner Tack? Absent. Commissioner Patterson?
Here.
All right, and with roll call being done, we will go to the Pledge of Allegiance. And a 1 and a 2. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the
republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible.
liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you. And move on to public comment. There is nobody in attendance. So we will move on to the minutes. Anybody have any questions or comments about the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a
Oh wait,
second?
I wasn't there though. I can't do that, I guess. Somebody else should.
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
All right, thank you. Is there a second? I'll second that.
It's second. Okay.
All right, thank you. All in favor, I vote aye. Anita?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, so it's 4. Well, actually, Robert, you need to abstain, I guess, because you weren't there. Pardon me.
Yeah,
So I guess 3-0 with 1 abstain. Motion passes. And we'll move on to item number 5, Sustainability Plan version 10 draft. Everybody have a chance to take a look at that? Anybody have any questions for Sarah or comments for Sarah regarding that?
I guess I should raise my hand in terms of order. I sent some comments along to Sarah on the plan, and we went over them. And I will let Sarah take the lead on how she wanted to present those comments to you for your consideration.
All right, thank you. Sarah, go ahead.
1 minute, and I'll bring that up. Oh. All right. So this is the version 10. The first thing I want to recognize is that there's no new branding to it. I know that was supposed to come back this time, but the branding rollout is taking a little longer than I thought it would take, but it's a very systematic approach to doing the rollout. So because of that, the branding hasn't been done. It will be done next month, but again, it's another change that we're going to have to wait for the sustainability plan. But the branding is coming. I got comments from several commissioners, and I tried to incorporate most of them. Anita is going to talk a little more about hers, but in the meantime, she did bring up some points that I felt might not become, when we talked about it, we met a little earlier about her suggestions, and we thought maybe instead of writing it as actual work plan components, it might be good to just acknowledge that they're important parts of a sustainability plan that we did consider. So one of them were just collaborating efforts and partnerships. We wanted to kind of point out that there's a lot of kind of parallel supporting and all kinds of different other organizations and agencies that are working on sustainability that we should kind of be aware of and keep track of and possibly talk about. So I added a paragraph on that for partnerships and a couple of the examples that we would have. And then with that to the agenda, under staff comments, I was going to give kind of the update each month on the Recycling Commission. And I thought maybe it would be good if we had a standing agenda item where all of you could kind of bring back the things that, partnerships and the things that you know about that we could talk about as well. So we can talk about whether you want that as a standing item on the agenda or if we just do it under comments. She talked about sustainability being very broad, which it absolutely is. So I added a paragraph kind of on the focus that there were things like housing that we didn't have in our work plan specifically, but that is very important to sustainability. So I wrote a little paragraph about that as well. She also said that identifying local risks might be a good part of this plan, might be an important part. So I left that blank for right now, but I did find some plans and I think some things that we can add to that I can back up from the climate action plan and so forth that kind of highlight local risks. And if we want to highlight them even further, we might take some of the things out of the work plan and maybe asterisk them or give some signal that these efforts actually work toward these specific local risks. Another consideration. The framework is the same. All of that I didn't change. We had talked about leaving or moving from gas to electric appliances. A lot of cities are doing that. Some of them even made some ordinances so that new housing couldn't have electric appliances. They all had to be, or gas appliances, they all had to be electric. But there is this new push for renewable natural gas, which is a really important possibility for clean energy. So we thought removing the language from choosing one or the other might be something to consider as well. The rest of this, I just added in, a couple of commissioners put in some different potential projects. So I added those into the lists. I think those are the main updates. But I do want to say that if you did send in changes for the sustainability plan or any kind of notes, I do encourage you to go back and make sure that I incorporated them and that they're added and changed correctly the way that you wanted to see. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was the outreach for this. And the last meeting we talked about how there wasn't a standing place on the agenda to talk about the sustainability plan, but it actually being on the agenda is how it has a standing possibility for public comment. The other public comment period is just to have an opening for something that isn't on the agenda because it's harder to bring those up during the meeting, so there's a specific opening for that. But for instance, if anyone in the public had a comment right now, this would be the time to talk about it. It's not closed, so this being our public comment period does help with that, or having this meeting published as well does help with the public comment. But I did speak with the communications director and with Ken, and we'll be putting out we'll work on putting out some information so that people know that we're talking about this. And then I'll talk to her a little more about maybe more community engagement. Those were the things that I incorporated now. The only other things are to make sure they're incorporated right, and then to change the branding. And then I did want to give Anita a little bit of time to talk about more detail about what she did submit and the things that she thought of when she looked at the plan. Would you like to do that now, Anita?
Certainly I can, unless I think before I do that, perhaps allow for some feedback on what you said thus far. Any feedback so far? Nope. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and I kind of tend to do things should I go ahead and screen share then, Sarah?
Yes, you can, or I have it, and if you like,
Sure.
I can go ahead and share it
Yes,
for you.
if you can screen share, that would be better.
Yep.
While Sarah's pulling that up, I'll just say the first part of it is where I started with, because obviously I wasn't here when this was developed, is, just asking the question of what is a sustainable city? And I prepared a more detailed and lengthy document. I don't know if that document would go in the files, but should we have questions arise later, I thought it might, Sarah can clarify that for me. It might be helpful to have that on record just to show the, a tracking of sorts as to the types of things that we discussed. So in that question, answering the question of what is a sustainable city, I looked at which would be the one slide over, please. Next slide, please. Sorry. Yeah, so these were the questions I asked. What is a sustainable city? What are the risks for us, particularly here in India? What are the actions to address the risk? And for the most part, they've been included in the plan. And I really do like the plan that was developed because it is very, action. It lends itself to being an easy action item to follow rather than being something that's, overly wordy and difficult to implement. So I really like the format and what has been done so far. And then the local policies and requirements, just making sure those were addressed, and then the summary recommendations. So I'll go to the next slide, please. Next one. And then in answering next, please. What are the sustainable development risks? I basically went to the UN definition instead, rather than trying to make up my own. And that's where those things like wages and housing and so on fell out of it. And luckily, well, I shouldn't say luckily, but as Sarah was saying, the general plan 2040 that the city has already done has addressed a number of these items. And there was a really good document also. It's called the housing element. The 6th update of the housing element for India is a very strong document. And that really goes into far-reaching detail, more than we would definitely ever want to do here. But just to give a nod to it so that someone can say, someone says, oh, did you address this? It's in the housing element, which was just updated, I guess, in 21. So that is being done by that group. So next, please. And that's just more on what's a sustainable city. And there's some metrics there. And next, please. And I'm actually not going to go through the whole thing, but I'm just going to go, and I assume if there's an interest, this can be, I don't know if Sarah wants to make this available to the rest of the group. So the issues that we have on hand here are, the one that seemed to be missing was the dust and air quality. And I say missing with a cautionary note, because it's probably somewhere else in the city's plans, I'm not sure, but AB 617 South Coast has an initiative down here at the moment. And, we can just partner with them. Both Miguel and I are part of that team, so we don't really need to redo it or take it on as a new initiative. If the South Coast Air Quality Management District and CARB already looking at dust issues, we don't need to take it on as a new one. And then the energy and climate, that was addressed, which was number 13. Poverty and hunger, like an economy, that's been addressed by which is goals 1, 2, 8, and 3. That's in the general plan 2040. And then sustainable cities goal number 11 of transportation was addressed already by the current draft of the plan, and then housing is a general plan. Goal number 6 and 12 was water, sustainable water, that was addressed, and then lands and building. And one, next slide, please. The one that wasn't, oh, there's, okay, there's one slide over. There's one that wasn't addressed in there in terms of health, and I probably skipped over that. And, you know, you might have some comments on one way or the other. Obviously, if half of our city, you know, to use an extreme example, if we have a marked percent of the population ill with something, then say COVID, that was not addressed in the plan and could not have been addressed. I don't know if the plan was drafted before or after this COVID issue, but health also is an issue. And for the scope of what we have in front of us, my suggestion to Sarah is the most that we would probably want to say is that we'll, you know, check on that metric and see if it's becoming a problem for sustainability or if it's resolving itself. And then on this section, we can probably skip over these slides and go all the way to the end you can flip through that, just wages, housing, community engagement, which Sarah just talked about, and she's working with a communications director on that. And then keep going, please. The local requirements looked at Southern California Association of Governments. They have a document called a sustainable strategy document, for which Indio is part of that group. And they seem to give out grants and so on. So we can look at, you know, what grants they have available for us. And they have within that guideline that addresses this rule called SB 375, some recommendations, you know, just very soft suggestions to cities on what they can do. But all the other things were there are addressed already. Really good job on doing that. It's not a very good work done so far. And if you would just scroll to the end with the final list of recommendations. So these are the summary recommendations. Like number one, I said, you know, we were talking about partnering with the ECV, Eastern South Coast Air Quality Management District, on their project, the general plan. COVID, I don't know if any of the commissioners, you know, or staff have any comments on whether we should even, you know, note COVID as a footnote in our report as something that could affect our city's sustainability, housing and affordability. We talked about the community outreach. And then on the next slide, there's one that's still missing. I don't see it. The clean energy, one slide up, please. The clean energy that Sarah was talking about, just to expand on that a little bit. Southern California Gas, our gas provider, they have a plan that says that they are going to be sustainable by 2045, which is basically the same year that our utilities are supposed to also decarbonize. So really, it's a race to zero between the gas company and our electric provider. My concern, and I haven't heard anyone raise it thus far, is if we switch everything in the desert to electric, and we get to 102 degrees or whatever temperatures we get to in summer, and everything is electric, that means we have no power. So we don't have resilience, and we don't have diversification of our energy supply, other than the people who have solar on their roof. So to me, it was a little bit, and do we even have the transmission? I hate to be to throw water on the party, but do we even have all the transmission that we need to switch every single thing we own to electric? I just a little bit concerned about that. So that's where I landed on that, and Sarah's thought was, well, let's leave it open rather than committing or mandating that one. And the other one that I don't see on my list, maybe I'm going too quickly, is environmental justice, giving just some thought to environmental justice as we roll out this initiative. So that was my thought. So now you kind of understand where I'm coming from, and it's just mainly adding two things, and it doesn't have to be this year as in 2022. It can even be for 2023. So that's my thought, is that the job is well done and it can only be made better. But it's been very well done. Thanks. That's it for me. Thank you. Comments, questions?
I think that's great. I'd love to get a copy sent, Sarah, if you could send copies to everybody so we can each commissioner can do a deeper dive on it. Benita, I think that's fantastic. You brought up a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed. And I think one thing that we had talked about when I first got on the commission with regards to energy is how to become less less fossil fuel dependent on energy, and the different ways we could do that. And I know we did have some discussions last year, about how deep and detailed we want to go with this document. So perhaps that's another discussion to have, incorporating more of your items in here, and maybe go into some more detail. Any thoughts, anybody?
Yeah, I was really interested in all the comments too. That was very helpful, Anita. The one thing I didn't understand was, so would we commissioners make changes to the existing sustainability plan based on your comments, or were you suggesting that staff make those changes? That part I'm a little unclear on.
I'm assuming that Sarah will make the changes as long as there are no strenuous objections. And the only ones that there were changes on, all of them, as you could see, for the most part, were additions. And like Sarah was talking about, footnoting those. Some of it is just showing the general plan 2040 is already doing this. The housing element, the sixth update of the housing element is already doing it. We know it's important for us, but it's not that we've omitted it. It's just that it's being done elsewhere. So the only things that we really didn't have in there, and it's stuff that I guess it's known. For example, the outreach plan. We know obviously it wouldn't be a live document if we don't do outreach on it, right? So we sort of intuitively know that, but it's not stated that we're going to do this. And I think likewise, environmental justice, it's intuitive, but we don't really talk about it. So, and I don't think for the plan, I think we just need to give a nod to it, if as it were. I don't think we have to have a full rollout plan. Like the director of communications for the city of Indio does not at this time, I don't think, need to come back to us with an engagement plan for us to, we just know that we need to figure it out, right? We don't have the answer yet. So the only one that was different from what was in the plan was that the current plan, the previous version of the plan said, we will promote 100% electric for all appliances, everything go electric. And my cautionary note on that is, and hopefully it's not because I'm a pessimist, it's just because when you get to summer and you have these rolling blackouts and they can't keep up, how are we going to have everything on electric? Am I being pessimistic or?
No, I mean, you're thinking ahead. And so how would IID, the electric utility, address that? Would they would need to have more generation and more supply available, and maybe they would have to change the infrastructure. Are those potential solutions to the problem if it arises?
Well, my thing is, like, for example, I have a gas stove now, right? And I intentionally bought gas because I don't want everything on electric, because, you know, I guess I like to eat. So even if the power is out, I want to eat. So hopefully my gas stove will still work. But if we tell all the developers who are building new homes, and we are building here, if we tell all of them put in electric home, they cannot put in any more gas, you know, poo-poo on gas, then all these new homes that are coming in will not have the capabilities for the thing. I think for the homes that are already built, it doesn't matter. They're going to stay. Most of the people like me, if we're gas, we're going to stay gas. But for the new homes coming in, if we tell the developers, and I don't know how strong a mandate, how much weight the plan bears, is it become a city ordinance? That part I don't know. Does it get?
I think it's aspirational. You know, Sarah can correct me on that, but I believe that's the force and effect that the sustainability plan has.
Well, it's my understanding regarding to the electric appliances, that's a state mandate that's gone into effect in all new homes moving forward. And same with installing solar panels on new homes moving forward is part of a state mandate as well. I don't know how well it's being implemented and actually done, but I read that that's the new rules the state's putting forward.
I'm not sure about the electric appliances, but the solar mandate, yes, that's from the state. But whether or not that's already been passed as a state ordinance, I believe that the efforts are going to be remain alive to try to bring that up to well, compliance for all new development. So I think, and I completely agree with what Anita's saying and the dangers of going completely electric in terms of blackouts and things along those lines. But at the same time, if there is a state mandate that comes down and makes it so that by 2045 we do have to have all those appliances, it may be beneficial to get ahead of the curve in terms of the city here.
Well, I guess if everybody's required to have solar panels, Anita, would that mitigate the risk of having all electric utilities?
Certainly it would. Anything that we can do, in my opinion, to diversify and not have everything dependent on the transmission system and the load requirements that we see in California over the summer will help us in terms of reliability. And I think as you know, on the state level, where it's AB 32 scoping plan, they're looking at net zero by 2045 and electrification and all of that. And even some of the electric, I guess they might be powering cars from the solar panel on your roof. I'm not sure how they're going to do that. But I think the word reliability, I think reliability does also come up at the state level. But it is not, I think it's not our, challenge is really, the gauntlet is really at Southern California gas and electric's door. If they want to remain as a viable business, that's what they've said. They're going to be supply natural, they call it renewable gas and hydrogen. And they're going to do carbon sequestration. That's their initiatives to be net zero for all of their use and everything that they provide. So that's their load really that's their work effort to sort out. Yeah.
Well, if they become net zero by using carbon sequestration, then there wouldn't be any problem using natural gas, would there? I mean, assuming that they achieve that.
Right, and the gas that they're gonna have is basically a biogas. They're not gonna be using natural gas anymore. They're going to be using this new biogas. That's not the right terminology for it, but it's a new type of gas.
Yeah, that's generated from waste, basically.
Yes. So that's what they're gonna be selling, not the gas that we're getting now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's interesting. How about carbon sequestration? I mean, is that really a viable technology within reasonable cost parameters?
I don't know of any. I mean, I've seen projects here and there, but in terms of widespread commercial use of carbon sequestration, I haven't seen that come to fruition yet. I mean, I think none of us have seen it. You can search online and there's a project here and there, and there's talk of putting it using where they pump out oil and gas using those same wells for the sequestration. And then there's talk of other technologies for sequestration, but to get that all in shape by 2045, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it seems like the best solution, if it can be achieved. I mean, because people don't seem to be moving off of fossil fuels very quickly, and carbon sequestration would be phenomenal if it could work.
I think we've lost Sarah somehow. It says,
Yeah, we did. I think she got kicked. Something happened with her connection. So anybody else have any other questions regarding Anita's draft that she sent?
I guess a few comments on my end. Overall, I think, as Anita said, the plan that we currently had, the draft is very, very well done, and it was difficult to come up with comments. But I do agree with you. A couple of sections that, even though they've been implied in the plan, may need to be fleshed out a little bit more. Is the public health aspect and environmental justice, and spelling out what that means for both for this committee and for the plan going forward. And then a few comments that I have overall from my notes on the plan, but I think I want to wait for Sarah for those.
I noticed for a brief moment that the lights were out in her office, and I'm wondering if she had a power outage.
I figured it was one of those sensors that turned her lights off.
Oh, is that what it was?
I'm not sure at this point.
Oh
She
my
thinks
God,
she'd get on using her cell phone. Oh, there she is.
Yep. Okay. So we lost power. Everything went black. I could hear you guys talk on the phone, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. But the real damage is that all the windows are
Anita's
closed.
comments
So it's
about
gonna take me a
the
little
power
time when I
going
share my
out.
screen to bring things up. All right.
yeah, I don't think there were any more comments. I think we were at Miguel. Sarah, that's where we stopped and we're waiting for you. He wanted to share his comments a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Do you want me to bring up the plan?
Sure. I think I'll be
2 minutes.
fairly brief, but
Great.
give me a second. So overall, as I had mentioned just now, I think the plan is very well done. It was honestly difficult to think about areas that were still available to comment on, improve on, and whatnot. But a couple of notes that I did have that I've already seen be reflective is possible projects for more sunshade structures that encompass solar. I think a few good areas for that. The teen center already has one, but Indio High School across from there, the student parking lot, I'm not sure if the staff parking lot have those available. So possibly trying to create projects that will allow for implementation of those solar rooftop shade structures. I think there, and in general in other areas as development happens. And I think the other main thing I had for clean energy is trying to create policies that as new development happen. I know, Sarah, you have talked in the past to me about the city already putting in place some of the infrastructure for the carports, the electric carports at some of the facilities or something along those lines.
Right, the 2019, I think the 2019 building codes are what you're referring to, which mandated that when you put in the new building, you have to put the plumbing to the EV station in. You don't necessarily have to put the station in, but you at least have to make sure that the lines are there, so, because that's the most expensive part of adding one later.
I think to a certain degree, it may be warranted to consider if we want to go that step further and say for new developments, whether it be a grocery store, parking lots, gas stations, particularly things along those lines, restaurants, that they may want to include a couple of those electric carports. As I mean, we all know California is going fully electric with vehicles fairly soon, so we want to make sure that the city has the infrastructure in place to meet that growing need. Let's see. For zero
Can I
waste,
interrupt and ask a question?
of course.
So that's a good point, Miguel, about commercial having, at least the infrastructure in place to put chargers. Sarah, does the city currently have an ordinance that requires developers to install charging stations?
No, and when I was talking to the planning director, he said that he didn't know of any offhand. He said there may very well be some in the Bay Area and places like that may have taken that step. I would like to actually push this conversation off to a little later in the agenda, till after we do our budgets, because we actually have a budget for EV charging stations. So once we understand that budget, you might want to have this conversation and with the budget actually come up with some concrete ideas.
Okay.
That'll come up in the work plan.
Oh, sounds good. All right. I'll quickly go through some of the other comments I had, if that's okay. For zero waste, I think this had already been alluded to, but creating a permanent disposal site or permanent location where waste can be dropped off, tires, batteries, things along those lines. And it could be several locations. I know that this Coachella Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District may already be collecting tires because of their cleaning up of barren lots where tires are dumped, and that being a breeding ground for mosquitoes. So there may be a partnership available there or with Riverside Hazardous Waste to try to create a permanent facility where residents can drop off their recyclables. And the other key things that I wanted to discuss, I think may actually be at the bottom of this plan. And Sarah, this was going to be something I requested. I couldn't seem to find a copy of the sewage and street master plan anywhere.
The sewage and, I'm sorry.
The drainage, I'm sorry. There's at the bottom of this document.
Yep, let's get down to that so I can.
There we go. The complete streets and drainage master plan. I was trying to find a copy of that to go through it. I think some of my other suggestions may already be incorporated in there. Increasing our capacity to deal with flooding on streets. As we know, there's a bunch of streets in the city that do flood with rain. Making sure that that's going to a stormwater runoff. And the other thing is trying to plan our streets to be better at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. A great way we could do that is considering roundabouts and where those can be placed in the city that will reduce traffic congestion as well as greenhouse gas emissions. So I was hoping I could find a copy of that somewhere so I could take a look and see if any of those suggestions have already been included there.
Yeah, I can definitely send that out. I'll put that in my notes to do.
Perfect. I think that's all I had.
I think it's on the website available to the public at this time.
Anybody have any questions for Miguel?
Yeah, the roundabouts are something that I understand are going to become more and more common. Are those provided for, Sarah, in any of the planning policies that the city has, or?
I'm not sure, but it may. I maybe in the general plan that may be in there, but I'd have to look. Like for roundabouts, or just in general more of what Miguel was saying about having traffic and streets be more environmentally and greenhouse, or lowering greenhouse gas in general.
Well, yeah, I mean, synchronizing the lights sounds like a good idea. I mean, if you go through some of the cities, I wouldn't say Indio so much, but some of the other cities in the valley, you go along 111 and you find yourself stopping more than seems to be absolutely necessary. And I think they use it as a traffic control mechanism. But more important is, you know, reducing greenhouse gases. And if they were able to better time those, then, you know, people would use less fuel. Like, is that the idea, Miguel?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think traffic synchronization is already included in this plan, and I think it's something that's absolutely necessary. But going along with that, and just thoughts of other things that have been seen is there's in some intersections in Los Angeles I've seen no left-hand turns for unprotected left-hand turns between certain hours when there's high traffic to reduce a bit more idling. So I think there's opportunities for other policies we can implement in very targeted locations where they make sense, where cars typically idle or cars typically pile up, to try to make sure that that congestion isn't happening as much. And then, of course, above all else, and some of the other comments I had, is just trying to see what other opportunities there are for active transportation, bikes, electric bikes, see how we can team up with CVAG in implementation for the CV link, things along those lines that might really help in trying to reduce how much we go on vehicle miles.
Yeah, I think getting people out of cars is a much better idea, or a much more sustainable idea long term. You know, increase. You know, we got such great weather here. People can ride a bike, you know, 350 days out of the year. And if we increase our, you know, CV link and bike lanes, and our, you know, widen our sidewalks for bikes, you know, that will hopefully get people out of cars, right?
And I don't think those are necessarily mutually exclusive either. A lot of the state funding does consider how you can improve traffic. Going back to the roundabout idea, implement that. There's a lot of, or not a lot, but there's some funding available for those type of projects that very closely tie in with exactly what you're speaking of, increasing bike lanes, things along those lines, and just overall city beautification that I think we'd be very competitive for if we start planning for in that method.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions or comments for Miguel with his suggestions? All right. So let's, Miguel, Sarah, if you can send Miguel's suggestions as well to if it's in a format you can send to us, that'd be great, and we can look at that. And let's implement ideas that have come up here. Does that make sense? And with
Yes,
that, we'll
absolutely.
thank you. With that, we'll move on to item number 6, budgets. Sarah, the floor is yours. Sarah, do you want to take over the budget topic?
I do. All my windows closed, so it's going to take a bit of.
Should we table this then?
No, I have it. Just a little more time. I think it's important to get through this. Okay, budgets. That's, I think, the best I can do right now. So the first thing we have is the waste diversion budget. This comes from AB 939 funds. So I think back in the 80s when AB 939 was passed, it was to divert waste from landfills. And with that legislation, cities were allowed to charge a fee within the rates that people paid for their trash pickup service. And that funding had to be used, or the city could use that to create waste diversion programs. The city took advantage of that, and we have an AB 939 fund. It's separate from the general fund. It can't be used really for anything except waste diversion. And we have, residents and businesses pay 23 cents a month as part of their waste service. And it brings in quite a bit of money, and we've not spent everything that comes in now for a couple of years, not all of it. So we have a bank as well. So with waste diversion, that's our biggest account for sustainability. And probably annually we could spend upwards around, $50,000 to $100,000 on waste diversion programs. And it includes SB 1383 and helping to get that message out and the things that need to be done so that we're able to be compliant with that legislation. We have that for waste diversion, zero waste, all of that. It also includes source reduction. Stormwater is our only funding that comes from the general fund. So that, I don't want to say takes away, but it comes from literally the general fund, which has to be spread out through all the different programs and departments in the city. We have to pay basically our legislators and so the state water boards get we pay them each year from this fund. They are the regulators and they oversee our programs. And then we work with a pool of other cities and Riverside County Flood Control District to administer our permit. And we do that together, and it's still quite a bit of money, but it's a lot cheaper than if we did a lot of the programs on our own. Also in stormwater, that number that yearly budget of $105,000 is going to have to go up soon because the state passed what are called the trash amendments, which means for all of our outfalls, anywhere rain can get into, will flow from the streets to the storm channel, Teller Valley Storm Channel, there has to be a full capture trash device that will capture trash down to 5 millimeters installed into every one of those drains. And we have a little over 230 of them. We have until 2030 to get that done, so we'll spread the cost out. But that number will definitely go up, and that is the one account that comes from the general fund. We get cans and bottles from each year from Cal Recycle, and this is a payment. It's not a grant that you have to, that's a competitive grant. As long as we fill out the paperwork every year and spend the money appropriately, where we get the money the next year. It fluctuates a little bit. It comes from if you have a bottle or a soda, it has a CRV of 5 cents or so, and you put it in your home container versus getting that 5 cents back, then the state basically saves that 5 cents. And so they pool that money and they allow the cities their portion of it to do things like have purchase recycling receptacles, water bottle fillers for source control. So we've used this money generally to buy waste and recycling containers either for our facilities or for the schools, and to get bottle filler water fountains out into our parks. The oil and filter collection events, that's the same type of thing. It's a payment. It's not a competitive grant. It's about $10,000 a year, and we use that to pay for the sustainability collection events when we collect oil and tires and all of that. That covers the oil and filter part of it. And then the mobile source air pollution. This is for the electric vehicles, alternative fuel vehicles, street sweeping, electric infrastructure. When you pay your licensing fee for your vehicle each year, a portion of that goes to reducing mobile source air pollution, so the pollution that's coming from all of these vehicles. And then a portion of all of that that gets collected by AQMD is sent back to the cities. And again, this is very specific to only be used for these specific programs, electric vehicles, and reducing ultimately mobile source pollution. So it can't go into the general fund, it can't be used for anything else. And right now, we have about $100,000 $100,000 in that account for these initiatives. But I will say that that's been growing for a while. The Indio, it's based on population. We get about $100,000 a year for these programs, but we spend, I think 75% now goes to a regional street sweeping program. That again, it saves us a lot more money than if we did it on our own. So we have an agreement with CVAG and all the other cities that we send the bulk of this money to that program. But it leaves about $20,000 each year that builds and builds. And so when you look at this number, like in some of the other ones, each year we could probably go back to having an amount close to that. But with the mobile source air pollution funds, once they're gone, it will take some time, a couple of years, to really build it up to a point where we have a substantial amount again. Those are our budgets, our main budgets. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Do we have a cost estimate? And I'm guessing this is probably a case by case, but, oh, and I'm sorry, Anita, I didn't see that your hand popped up there. But do we have a cost estimate for the infrastructure already being in place for an electric vehicle charger, but actually putting up the charger itself, how much that would be?
I know that the cost of the chargers, I want to say they're around $5,000. They're not super expensive,
Okay.
but I don't know what an electrician or whoever it would take to actually hook it up and make it work would cost. But, you know, when we talk about incentives about EV chargers, then, you know, if that's what you want to look into, absolutely, we'll see if we can figure that out and come up with something concrete so we can really have a plan, not just of EV charging incentives, but this charging incentive specific. So I will look into that. I'll I can get some information on that.
Anita, you have a question?
Yeah, so my comment was, you know, kind of going back to the plan itself and the comment that I had regarding grants. And, you know, I'm not in the grant world. I don't work with grants a lot. And it seems to me that, so my comment is just based on lack of familiarity, because it seems as though what we would need to supplement this, what we should make use of to supplement this budget is grants that are available. But to me, because I'm not in the grant world, these grants just seem to pop up, and they, you know, I think that like the presentation that we had recently on the grant for the roof, you really have to have a good enough of a headway or notice on these grant applications to work on them. So it seems to me, and help me out here, that we need to know what grants are available or coming up or anticipated and have a schedule for applying for those far in advance. Am I on the wrong path here or no?
No, I don't think you are. A lot of times, a lot of times we just don't know about them until it's the 9th hour and we try to put things together.
Exactly.
It's really helpful to try to stay ahead of it. The city does have a grant, B&E, the one who talked to us about that grant. They kind of track grants for us. But I think with the last one, as soon as it was released, the turnaround time was very quick, and that happens as well,
Right.
even if you know they're coming. But they do track, and you know, if I hear of anything coming up, I will definitely send it out to you guys. But we do pay them to kind of keep an eye on what's coming.
I guess my comment is, you know, they're probably, that department is probably focusing, they have eyes on a lot of things. Would it, you know, it would be up to them to say yes or no, but should we request that they prepare for us, if they know, a list or a schedule of grants that are going to, you know, just, I don't know, spend however many days or whatever is required, 2-3 days, and do a search to see what grants are going to be coming up and when, so we have enough headway to apply for that. Like, for example, the Southern California Association of Governments on their Sustainable Communities program, they apparently issue grants every year for, you know, these types of projects. And I saw that, I think it was in, I want to say 2018 or something like that, the city of Indio got a grant from them for bike paths or something. I saw a grant that was given to city of Indio, but I don't know what, you know, what's going to be issued this year. So can someone do that research for us, or should we be doing it ourselves, which is?
Honestly, I think probably a little bit of both. If you
Okay.
hear of something, or if you know of something, it would be very helpful to bring it certainly to my attention, and I can, or to the groups, or I can send it out to the group. We can do that, and also certainly we do rely on B&E as well. So once they send out their information, I haven't seen one for a while, but they usually send out a "this is what's up and coming in the grant world" kind of bulletin, and I will send those B&E things out to you guys as well.
All right, anybody else have any other questions regarding the budget? Any comments? If not, we'll move on to item number 7, the work plan items.
Yeah, so I wanted to change the agenda around so that we actually start listing those work plan items instead of just the general sustainability plan goals. And that way we can kind of keep track, or really kind of focus on what we're trying to get done this year. The first thing that is actually in our 2022 box on the, or one of the things in our sustainability plan and the work plan for 2022 is to consider initiatives for EV charging infrastructure. So I did want to talk about that a little bit, because now we know we have a budget. I can certainly bring back an idea of the cost to actually get those things put in once they're plumbed, and maybe even like the actual 2019 building code. I don't know what was built after that, so that would, but if I can find out, that would give us some areas of an idea of where that plumbing does exist now because of the code. Those two pieces of information I think will be helpful. Other than that, it's kind of up to you guys what other ideas you might have to make these incentives to get these chargers out in in Indio, with that, budget.
I have a question to the group regarding EV chargers. I've only been in Tesla once, and it got charged up by that McDonald's by Cabazon. How does it work exactly? Is this something that will EV charger stations end up being kind of like gas stations in the future, or is this something that we, do like there's the one by the Aldi in Palm Desert, by that Target there? Is that something like, does it go into parking lots for the most part, or is this something where a company's going to come in and create a business around this? And if that's the case, do we as a city want to incentivize that possibility so that, because I think part of the issue with charging stations, it seems to me, is location, location, location. And, if no one knows it's there, we can put them behind every restaurant and business and government building in the county. If no one knows they're there, no one's going to use them. So what is this? What's the short-term and long-term goal with this is my question to the group.
That's a good question. I've actually been negotiating a lot of leases for these charging stations. I don't know the answer to your question, but I can just comment on what I've seen. I have a lot of clients with commercial real estate, some cities and other governmental agencies. And, for example, Tesla is leasing space in commercial parking lots for this purpose. And they're trying to do it, at least in the instance that I'm involved in a place where people are likely to spend some time inside of the commercial facility. And then I've also seen leases or other programs for charging stations that are in public places, a limited number, maybe 4 spaces. I think a lot of those were done through the VW settlement. VW had Dieselgate, and they had to pay something like $1 billion in settlement funds, which are being used for, among other things, these electric charging stations. So that's what I've seen is leases between the companies and existing uses where they can be placed, I think, in locations where, people are likely to spend a significant amount of time because of the recharging time that's required by an electric vehicle, which hopefully will be going down. I've also seen clients who own gas stations being approached with the same sort of leases. And I've actually seen some of these in gas stations. So, I think they are going to follow a little bit different model just based on what I've seen. Different than gas stations.
I think I tend to agree with Commissioner Patterson in that regard. I think times, from what I understand, it may be like 20 to 40 minutes now to get a full charge of one of the vehicles. So usually you want to have them somewhere where people are going to be spending some time, whether it be in a meal, doing shopping, things along those lines. To that point, I'm not sure if it'll speed up in the future, but I think one thing that we also want to keep in mind is as we look at housing and individuals who may not live in single family homes, in apartments or what have you, is thinking about how we can get some of this infrastructure in place in those places as well, so that that option of alternative fuel vehicle may be more appealing or more possible for them. As far as the grant goes, or the money we have available, I'm wondering, would there be any way, because $100,000 doesn't seem like it will go all too a long way in terms of creating a ton of infrastructure. Obviously, it'll help out however many we can get funded. But would it be possible to do something like a revolving fund or a revolving loan opportunity for developers to take advantage of some of this money, or for residents to take advantage of some of this money, and then they repay it to the city. I'm not sure how far-fetched that would be to make something like that possible with these funds.
I don't know, but I can certainly ask. That's something I can bring up. We'll have a conversation here and see if it's we can add to the plan that's realistic.
Yeah, on that point, I know of a project where, a couple projects where the electric charging was required, you know, as a condition of approval for the project. And in one of those cases, it was Oshpod that imposed the requirement. You know, they're the permitting agency for hospitals, and you know, they're notoriously demanding. And so I've seen Oshpod require them. And then I've heard of, I don't have any direct knowledge, but I've heard of cities placing a condition of approval on a project that there be, you know, electric charging stations. And it sounds like we don't have any kind of an ordinance or a policy that requires that in the city. And obviously the city council would have to adopt a requirement like that. I don't think the Sustainability Commission has the authority to adopt ordinances, but you know, we can make recommendations to the city council. And so if one of the commissioners had a idea that, you know, that would be a appropriate requirement for the city to impose, we could certainly present something, you know, a recommendation to the city council.
Anyone's thoughts on Commissioner Patterson's idea?
I think I'm still seeking for, you know, considering this and turning it over in my mind is, you know, really what I agree with what Miguel is saying, which is that the 100,000, you know, is really more going to serve as the administrative juice to get this rolling, and not so much as the money to break the concrete and pay for the charging station itself, or the stations themselves. I don't know how much they cost, but it just seems everything costs way more than you would like it to. Or I don't know, make an app or something. Are we, you know, Sarah can expand on that. Is that how we would spend that? Where she would see us think we could spend that 100,000? But it seems to be, yeah, I think all the questions are valid, and it seems as though we would just want to put our thoughts together. I agree that the role of the Sustainability Commission would be to make recommendations to the City Council. So I think we would just need to put together our thoughts on how to promote that. And I'm thinking particularly of linkages to any mandates that are coming down statewide, or any funding, because VW got sued, but I believe there are also other lawsuits. I could be incorrect on that, but I believe there are also some other manufacturers, and I actually have not kept track of it, but there might be additional funding coming down for such for these charging stations, and I don't even know how we get in queue for that money.
Well, I think the city got some of that VW money, didn't it, Sarah? Or am I wrong about that?
No, we didn't get money. What they did, they became Electrify America, and they put in DC fast chargers up near the Walmart or on the Walmart on I-10. So the DC fast chargers are the chargers that can charge a car in 10 minutes or less. But there are no cars on the road that can actually accept a charge that fast.
Oh,
So
really?
that's where they feel like, yeah, so they feel like they will be built. I mean, certainly they can be built. The charging infrastructure, Electrify America has decided that's what they're going to put in because that's the way they think it's going to go. But the other avenue are the ones that are the level 2 chargers like we have at City Hall that take a little more time. And the idea on that is when you drive an electric car, it's not like gas where you wait till you run out of gas or get low and then you get more gas. When you have an electric vehicle, where you just top off your car wherever you are. And so you want to build an infrastructure of level 2 as well, so that people who are just driving around and not going on long trips on the freeways can keep their cars topped off no matter what they're doing, if they're doing something all day. And that's what the level 2 charging infrastructure is more about, having that infrastructure ready.
Yeah, I just did a Google search here on city requirements to install electric charging stations. And all the results that I was able to look at in the brief time I have talk about the requirements. If you want to build an electric charging station, you have to get a building permit and so on and so forth. But I don't see anything here that would indicate that other municipalities are actually imposing a requirement of electric charging stations.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll look into, like, if one of the commercial areas wanted to put one in, what would the city need to do? And a lot of times maybe we can work just starting from there. Like with solar, they made a regulation that cities had to be able to expedite those permits. And so let's find out where we are as far as this is where we are right now, kind of a baseline. So I'll find out kind of the cost to put these, to have these added once the plumbing is in there, where the plumbing is somewhere in most places around the city, and what kind of permits through the city need to get.
To that point, I think Commissioner Patterson's suggestion that there be some requirement or suggestion, encouragement that developers do put these chargers in place into new developments. I think that's something warranted and something we would definitely want to look at in terms of putting in front of council. But I think there's still some information we want to dole out into exactly what we want to put in front of them. But I think that's a direction that we definitely want to be looking towards.
So should the takeaway from this be that we come to the next meeting with a list of recommendations? Because I actually, when it said it, the line item on the agenda, well, I don't think I definitely haven't researched it myself. So I'll speak for myself. I have not researched it sufficiently, but I can do so and see what I can come up with. I mean, in terms of what we want to, our milestone on this, what is our next milestone? How do you perceive us proceeding? That was difficult to say, by the way. Proceed as perceiving, trust me.
I would say that first we need to know what we're asking. So what does it cost to actually do this? What kind of permits do you need? That kind of thing. So we need to know what we're going to be asking people to do. And then what would be helpful from all of you is what is going on, like do that research in other cities. Are there other cities that are either requiring them or trying to give some kind of incentive to increase them?
Sir, if I might add, another thing to ask is, what does an EV charger infrastructure within a city look like? You know, what kind of, you know, like how many does like a city our size, how many EV charger stations do we need in a city our size? And how spaced out would they need to be, right? So There's one at Walmart in North Indio. There's one at City Council, the City Hall. I don't know of any other ones in Indio. Do we need to have another one off Dillon Road by the truck stop there? Do we need to have one in South Indio by 50 and Jefferson? You know, that kind of a thing I think we need to figure out too is, you know, what does the infrastructure physically look like within our city? Do we need one at Jefferson and Indio Boulevard off the freeway exit? You know, that kind of a thing. So if we so my point is, if we find out we need to have 15 individual EV charger stations within the city limits of Indio, and we have 5, then we can kind of know we need to get 10 more. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, with that,
Good idea.
if there's anybody else have any other suggestions or questions I think that Sarah needs to ask, if you can, because we're kind of running late here. So if you could email those to Sarah so she has them, and then get the information for the next meeting. Move on to 7.2 SB 1383, Sarah.
You're muted, Sarah. You're muted, Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, we are kind of running out of time here, so I'm going to run through this very quickly. I just wanted to give kind of a background of 1383 very quick, and then after that we'll just, I think Jerry wanted this on the agenda so we could talk about what's coming. So basically 1383 is all about moving the organics and food out of the waste stream because it's mostly being sent to the landfill right now. There's a really good reasons for it. It's the largest waste stream in California. Your green waste, your food waste, that's what's taking up most of the landfills. And at the same time with food, a lot of people are going hungry. So taking that out and actually reusing it in a way to feed people is really important. On top of that, if it goes to the landfill, it creates methane, which is a super strong greenhouse gas, so that's just heating our climate that much more. So you can see why it was done and why it was important. The regulations actually took place in January 1st, 2022, which is why you're hearing about it right now. But keeping in mind that a lot of these regulations hit, when they hit, they're going to raise waste rates to residents, and they're especially going to hit restaurants and places like that. And in the last 2 years with COVID, these two entities have been hit pretty hard, and it was just a very difficult time during COVID to try and tell a restaurant that hasn't been open for 3 months that now we're going to raise these rates and put these regulations on you. So there's valid reasons why January 1st, 2022 came around and nobody knew about SB 1383. But it's time now, and CalRecycle has made that very clear. They are going to be the oversight agency, so we are going to have to, everyone is going to have this service. Commercial facilities must have the service. Residential folks must have the service. There has to be an edible food program. It can't just all go to compost. If it's good food, at least I think it's 20% of it has to be diverted to a place where people who need that food can get it. A lot of outreach. We have to buy compost at the end or some kind of product from recycling this organic waste. That way it closes the circle and you don't just have a whole bunch of compost or other, however else you're using it, just sitting somewhere. And there's a lot of monitoring and compliance. We are going to have to do a lot of outreach. We have started our outreach, and I hope to be able to bring that to you pretty soon. And then we have to create an ordinance, so it's enforceable. It's not just everybody has to do this, it's everybody has to do this, or the city has to create an ordinance to be able to actually enforce and fine people if they don't. And if we don't, CalRecycle will enforce on the city and then fine the city. And that's the gist of the overall portion of this. So that's coming right now. We are writing the ordinance. We'll take that to City Council to be adopted. Again, that's an absolute in the legislation. We have to do it, or CalRecycle will fine us. And if we find in the 2 years that people are still not on board, then we have to show that we are enforcing our ordinance. And then we are writing a lot of these requirements into our franchise agreement with Burtech. They're going to have to not only do the services, but they're going to help a lot with the outreach and a lot of the other things that we're going to be, that we have to be doing now. Indio, once we get those two things in place, we're going to start rolling out the state. Part of this is that everyone has to have the same color trash cans. So here we have the burgundy, the gray, the green for residential, and that has to change to gray for waste, blue for recycling, and green for organics. It doesn't have to happen overnight. 1383 allows that between now and I think 2036, we can slowly roll out containers, but that's difficult for us because if you have an old gray container, it's recycling. If you have a new gray container, then it's trash. So it's Cal Recycle did release grant funding for cities. So the city of Indio has, there's about $121,000 that the city of Indio can get once we adopt our ordinance. We're scheduled for the second round of funding, so that would be in September 1st. We should be able to, we'll know if we're going to get that. And we're going to use that, the idea is to use it to buy a bunch of blue barrels so that we help with that confusion. But all the new barrels that go out will have Spanish and English and lots of pictures on what goes into it, whether it's gray or new or old. So Burtech is actually working on all of that. And you're going to hear a lot more about this in the coming months. Obviously, once we get the franchise agreement and the ordinance in place, then we're going to start really pushing out this to not only residents, but also commercial facilities. They ultimately have no choice. They'll be rolled into an organic service as well as part of their waste and recycling services. We have funding to help all kinds of diversion. One of the issues with 1383 that I don't like is that it doesn't at all prioritize waste reduction. It won't change your bill because it's all kind of rolled into one. You have to pay for the service. So those kinds of things, I think using, kind of setting the stage for using some of that waste diversion money to either think of a way to reward some of these commercial facilities or residents or whoever by reducing waste to begin with, I think might be good programs. Certainly helping them, rolling this out as much as we can. The other issue is that, next time we talk about it, I'd like your thoughts on this, is that for some reason, 1383 allowed plastic bags to be able to be one of the ways that you collect organic waste. So in Indio, what that means is that you can put your compost or your food waste in a plastic bag, and we're going to tell you to put that in your compost bin. Put your plastic bag full of food waste in your compost bin. Burtech or any other provider has to write a letter each year saying they can take it out, and then as long as they do, then that's okay. Here, we have to find a way to separate it because we only have composting facilities here. It's our only option right now for moving the food waste. And in the compost bins, you have to have a very specific ratio of green waste versus food waste. So they can't be mixed together, just thrown in together. They need to be separated. They need to be in some kind of bag. But I just don't think I can tell people to put plastic in their compost bins. I'm having a really hard time with that. I think that it's just going to have to be paper or a compostable bag, and that's how I want to write it.
So we'd need to get paper bags then for our food waste and put that into the green trash can?
So that's what I am saying. It doesn't mean that's going to happen. Really, I
understand.
I need input from all of you.
It makes sense to me. How is Burtech going to like open every plastic bag and?
Oh, no, it's not like that. They have, there's actually these giant separation machine. One of them is called a Thor machine. But what it does is basically it pounds the the wet kind of food waste to the bottom, and they've been known to take out quite a bit of, they can take up to like 95 or 99% of contaminants. The problem is microplastics and things like that. I mean, there's not a specific, this is how you test for microplastics in compost, and what about nanoplastics and things like that. And is everything being tested for this? And so I have many questions about putting plastic into compost, of all things, that's going to go on food. Even if we can say we can take it out, I just think it has to be either compostable or paper. It has to break down. Plastic doesn't break down.
I think I definitely tend to agree with you on that notion, Sarah. I think while those efforts haven't necessarily taken place, I mean, this is as good a time as ever to start those discussions and try to get some of those products in our stores so consumers can make that choice. Shouldn't be making that choice. I had a question in terms of what you were talking about, if it's edible food, and I'm sure this is a bigger topic that we can discuss in the future, but if it's edible food, it has to go to somebody who can eat it. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, it won't go through the city, but we need to make sure that places like grocery stores and places like that have food that could still be edible that they can't use, makes it to a place like the Fine Food Bank.
So that's more of a commercial requirement than for a resident, that let's say that a resident has some food that they're throwing away, they don't have to worry about. Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. How could you possibly do that on a residential basis?
That would be tough.
Yeah.
So if we can be real quick, I've got a call at 7 o'clock. So I thought this meeting was going to be a lot shorter due to the small agenda. So we can move on to the next 7.3, Sarah.
Yeah, I'll go through this quickly. Some sustainability collection events, they are scheduled. They're on the website. I have a PowerPoint, but we'll go through that. It's on the website. The next one is coming up on May 19th. So we have a cleaning event, the cleanup event with the city council members and everyone next weekend. And then we just have our normal paper shredding, oil collection, sustainability event that we do at the Indio Corporate Yard, the Water Authority, on March 19th. So that's all I have for that.
Thank you. And 7.4.
Yep, the new hire package. I can go over that in the next meeting. But really, that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Commissioner comments. Any commissioners have any comments they want to share with the commission and with Sarah?
No, not from me, thank you.
And for me,
For myself, and just very quickly, in terms of some grants availability and talking about being in at the 9th hour, there's a couple that we may be able to get in hour 0, those being California's Transformative Climate Communities Grant, which the round 4 timeline, the NOFA, the Notice of Funding Availability, is going to be released March 8th, I want to say. So that's coming up. I think that's something that we may want to put into an agenda and try to consider some of the projects. And the other one that, and the NOFA I don't think has been announced just yet, but that should be coming up soon, is the ATP through the Department of Transportation Active Transportation Program. That one, they just wrapped up some community outreach events and city outreach events to try to create the criteria. And I think that's going to be coming out soon, the criteria as to how they're going to be grading that, and NOFA following shortly as well. So a couple of ones to keep track of that are going to have some pretty big funding. And hopefully I'll be there on Saturday for that event for the community cleanup.
Cool, thank you. If you could follow up with Sarah, the links or the information of that stuff, so her and her team have it, that'd be great.
Of course, I'll send those to her.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other commissioner comments? With that, we'll go quickly to staff items. Sarah?
No.
All right, and so with that, I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. All in favor? I vote aye.
I
Aye.
Okay, so we're adjourned. Thank you very much. Lots to talk about, a lot of stuff, a lot of food for thought, and we'll see you all in a month.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
yeah.
Thank you.